Well, it's been about 20 years or so ago that a church I'd never heard of down in Bossier City, Louisiana, invited me and my worship minister to come down to join them on a Sunday. And that's when I met Ben Brewster, the minister who was there then and is still there today, which speaks volumes, long-term ministry. I went back, I think, one more time, maybe twice, but I think just twice total down there. But Ben and I have been friends ever since then, and Ben has actually helped our safe harbor with our prisoners. He has gone down to visit with me and gone to the rodeo down there with me. So if you don't know, the rodeo is the only time of the year you get to visit lots of prisoners. So that's why we went down for that. And so when we started this whole series, he actually was the first one I reached out to and asked him, pick from anything. And it always surprises me what people picked. You came right back with peace, which, why would you pick peace? So tell me, what is it about peace that made you want to talk about that today?
Patrick, it's good to be with you today and with our Safe Harbor church family. And I've loved the series so far, the different guests that you've had. And I know you've had people from Michigan and Ohio and Tennessee. And so I'm happy to represent the Deep South today.
There you are.
All the way from Louisiana. And we need to have you back down there soon. Okay. It's been too long. But I picked peace because for a big part of my life, I confused peace and comfort. I thought comfort meant peace. I thought if everything lined up, if I had all my ducks in a row and everything worked exactly the way that I thought it should work, that was peace. Mm-hmm. Which is a horrible way of looking at it, especially when you're in ministry. Because as you know, ministry is messy. People are messy. Things don't always go the way that you think that they should. There's conflict. People get out of sorts with one another. And to me, I thought, well, wait a second. Then I'm not having peace because I wasn't comfortable. Mm-hmm. But peace is being able, it's not based on your circumstances. It's something that you have regardless of what happens, regardless if there's conflict with people, regardless if everything's going as it should or not. And I think that's why the story in Mark 4 about Jesus calming the storm speaks so much to me. He says to his disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake. He tells them, we're going to the other side of the lake. Storm comes up. And they go into panic mode. And don't you care about us? Their comfort was disrupted. Mm-hmm. Jesus had already told them they're going to the other side of the lake. Mm-hmm. And a storm caused them to forget that. They put so much into their comfort rather than the Prince of Peace who was on the boat with them. And I love what he says. He says, peace be still, or other translations, quiet be still. I think the word there is actually hush. Mm-hmm. And that's what I had to learn, particularly in ministry, that God, the peace of God speaks into situations, and all these voices that are trying to undo you, God says, hush. And you learn to trust that voice.
Okay, that's very interesting. Last week, talking to Steve, we made a lot of the same points about joy. Mm. That joy was not determined by what is actually happening to you, your current situation. It is not a happening thing or a happy thing. It's a joy that is deep, regardless of what's going around you. That interests me. Peace is a very deep subject because it's rather like love. It's a word that means many things. Mm. So we can be at peace. We can say that an absence of war is peace. But then the Bible also talks, blessed are the peacemakers. And I find that these are different. These are not the same thing. These are different aspects. Now, for ministers, very often, our job is to kick the tires and put out the fires. And constantly, whacking the whack-a-mole, pushing things down, and then we call that peace. It's a lot harder to make peace by doing more than removing conflict, but by actually bringing people together. Now, you've been in one place for how long? How long have you been there?
26 years.
26 years. You should get a medal. It's very rare that we run across that. How do you maintain peace in yourself and in a congregation for 26 years.
You don't. You don't always. It's impossible, because it goes back to the people being messy. And we've had conflicts. We've had disagreements. We've had people leave. We've been able to work through some things. It's not always a bed of roses. As you know, ministry is not. You've got an incredible story of how God has delivered you and blessed you abundantly despite what others have done. It's the Genesis chapter 50 when Joseph tells his brothers, you meant to harm me, but God meant this for good. And your whole life is a testimony to that. But to stay anywhere for 26 years, the people there have shown me an incredible amount of grace. I don't deserve. I've never believed that I deserve to be a minister. I believe it's a calling, and God looks at us, and at least when I think about myself, He knows the weakness, and He says, "Look, my power is going to work through your weakness. You just be obedient. You do what I'm calling you to do, and let me handle the rest." And sometimes I want to be in control of everything, and I sacrifice the peace that God offers because I'm so busy trying to be in control or to hold on to past hurts and allow things to detour me and distract me from the peace that God continues to bring in. God's always been faithful. In my life, God has always been faithful. For me, the heartbeat of Christianity was, and always will be Jesus.
Amen. Yeah.
And He's our peace. Mm-hmm. And I feel very strongly. I think it was Rachel Held Evans that once said, the one story that she was willing to be wrong about is the story of Jesus. And I'm willing to stake everything on Jesus, and that He's telling the truth when He says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I believe Jesus is telling the truth, whether you're in full-time ministry or not.
That He even talks about my peace I leave with you. Mm-hmm. Not peace as the world, but my peace. And we even sing the song about the peace that passes understanding. What kind of peace can we have in this kind of world? I mean, it's a very divided world. We talk about that a lot. I think people need to read more books. We're not worse off than we've ever been. We're not more warlike than we've ever been. In fact, there are fewer wars. But our conflicts now take place over social media. They take place over our broadcast media. They take place via politics, which we confuse with religion. That's not new. We were doing that around the time of Constantine. Mm-hmm. We wrap these things up, and then we feel like we've got to sort them all out, and that peace can only take place when you and I agree that I'm right about all these things. And I will never get to that point. And so a peace that passes understanding has got to be something which goes against that instinct, that you and I have to be at peace, even if we disagree about something that we both think is very, very, very important. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll give an example here. I used to know a lot more about Paul than I did Jesus, because in the tribe in which I was raised, Paul was the lawgiver. He was our Moses. And so we went to Paul to settle all arguments, which is difficult because Paul doesn't always consistently answer the same way, the same question. He talks about, for example, when he was talking about women, said, you got to go this way because Eve sinned first. Well, then another time he'll say, well, in Adam, who sinned first. Well, he's making a different point. Mm-hmm. Well, David Lipscomb, way back in the day, said that in his own life, when he got confused about what Paul or what somebody in Nehemiah was saying or the like, he would just go back to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Whenever I changed to read the Bible through Jesus rather than reading Jesus through the rest of, like Paul or something, that changed dramatically. Jesus never tried to settle the arguments. The Samaritan woman wanted to argue with him, and he wouldn't even answer the argument. He wouldn't, because he was interested in winning her. When his disciples said, is it now that we ride into Jerusalem? He just said, well, it's not given to you to know days and time. He didn't even try to argue the point. How hard is it to not argue our point?
That is so well said.
I can be peaceful only if I'm okay with not being God and not being in charge of you and not being in charge of everyone else. I've used this illustration before. Our city planners in Central Tennessee don't plan. So they say yes to all development, and the roads are still where they used to be. Mm-hmm. So this morning, a 30-minute drive turned into an hour and 10 minutes for me. I want to complain about traffic, but the fact is, I am traffic. Mm-hmm. I'm in it. I want to complain about humanity. Yeah. But as you so said humbly about yourself, I would never have picked me for ministry. The flaws in me, the questions in me, the anger sometimes that comes, and my prayers don't sound like other people's prayers. Mm-hmm. And yet God still can use his problem children, obviously. Absolutely. How do we move forward with this? How do we find a way to move forward with peace? I mean, what stories, what lessons have you learned?
I think your point about trying to play God and control others is so spot on, Patrick. I think we all do that from time to time. You've had people do that to you in your ministry. I've had people do that to me in my ministry. And I want to go back to something you said about Jesus. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love that Tim Keller used to say a lot when he would go to some of these Ivy League schools, and he would do Q&As, and there'd be skeptics and atheists that would ask him questions about Christianity. One of the things he would tell people is, where I start with those who disagree with me is by asking, can we agree on Jesus? Let Jesus be the starting point. So that doesn't apply to someone that doesn't believe in Jesus, but if you're dealing with a fellow believer, a fellow Christian, and you have an argument about some issue or topic, which we have a lot of. I think Richard Hughes, in one of his histories of the Restoration Movement, called it the fighting spirit in the Churches mm-hmm. of Christ. Mm-hmm. We have a fighting spirit. We like to brawl, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But what if we start with Jesus instead of the issue? We start with Jesus. Can we agree on Jesus and then move from that point? So I think that's a huge key.
It is, but only if we know Jesus.
Right.
And so I challenge people, read the Gospels over and over and over. And Jesus said, the sheep will know me, they'll mm-hmm. know my voice. Yeah. You got to know his voice. Mm-hmm. And that'll guide you through the genocide portions of the Old Testament. It'll guide you through some of the arguments of Paul. My rule is, if Jesus wouldn't say this, if I cannot imagine Jesus saying this, then he's not saying it.
Yes.
But that comes down to a lot of things. I mean, who do we vote for? He didn't tell us. Mm-hmm. How much should a person make? Mm-hmm. He didn't tell us. Mm-hmm. How much are we allowed to buy? How many shirts are we allowed to own? He didn't say. Mm-hmm. But let's move off the trivial. He didn't explain the Trinity to us. Now, I'm a committed Trinitarian, but I have no problem with people who struggle with it. Mm-hmm. Because I understand there's not a chapter where he lays it out. He tells us we're never going to be alone, and I think he teaches the Trinity bits and pieces through. But I will not separate from somebody if we agree about Jesus.
Yes.
Now, I've acted like I don't like Paul here. I actually do. And in one of his longest sustained subjects, it was Romans 14:1 through 15:7, where he starts off by saying, don't dispute, just don't debate over disputable matters. Mm-hmm. And then he ends it in 15:7 by, accept one another as Christ has also accepted you. Mm-hmm. That one has hit me. Just a very brief story, and then I want you to share any stories or where you want to go from here. We lived in a village called Dundonald in Scotland, a very small, typical Scottish village, one main street. Things you would not expect to see, I saw. I stepped out on my, didn't have a porch. Our door opened right on the pavement, the sidewalk. And I turned around, and this is in the 80s, and there was a punk standing there. Now, that's what it was called in the day. I'm not being derogatory. Tall, scarily skinny, a lot of piercings, and the high pink mohawk. And he was obviously drunk 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, struggling down the street, holding the wall to stay up. My first, second, or third thoughts about him were not gracious. They were not kind. They were not sympathetic. But then somehow it hit me hard. Jesus hung as long on the cross for him as he did for you. And I have never forgotten that moment, that lesson. Now, instead of looking upon him as a waste or a shame or a problem, I look upon him as a fellow traveler who maybe his problems are on the outside and mine are on the inside, but we both need Jesus.
Yes.
What lessons have you learned about peace? Do you have any stories or anything you want to bring us out of Scripture?
That is so powerful, that story. It's a great reminder. We typically gravitate to people who look like us and think like us and act like us. And
because we're right.
Right. And we confuse unity with uniformity.
Yes.
It was years ago. I think it was in the old Image magazine. I don't know if you ever read that, but Ruel Lemons edited it for a while. And I believe it was Ruel that had an article on the difference in unity, union, and uniformity, and how we often confuse unity with uniformity. Mm-hmm. And you look at Romans 15, verse 7, therefore accept one another as Christ has accepted you. It's a reminder that our basis of acceptance of another person is Jesus, not if they go down the line and agree with all of my views. Mm-hmm. We had Leroy Garrett come speak to us in the year 2000 down in Louisiana where I'm at, and he made a point. He emphasized this verse. He said, "This is the key, the thesis statement in the entire letter to the Romans, and this is something that we have forgotten in our movement. We've forgotten what Paul is saying here through Romans 14 and chapter 15. And one of the things that Barton Stone was concerned about, and he wrote about in the Christian Messenger, his journal, is that we forget the Spirit of Christ. In all of our quests to just be Christian, and you know where that's taken us, mm-hmm. right? We're going to reestablish the first century church, which is, that's not going to help us with unity or peace, because we're living in the 21st century. We're not mm-hmm. called to live in the first century.
Right.
We're called to follow Jesus. And what does it look like in this century? What does it look like today? And how do we show the peace of Christ? Well, one way is I don't have to control you. I listen to a lot of your content, and I agree with 99.9% of it. Every once in a while, you say something and I scratch my head, which I don't do very often because I don't have much hair to scratch anymore. And I'm like, I'm just not sure about that. But it doesn't cause me any sleepless nights. Yeah. It causes me to study more. It causes me to consider different viewpoints. And that's a beautiful thing. And I hope we can recapture that in the church at large. Not just mm-hmm. one particular denomination, but the church at large. That I don't have to think like you, and you don't have to think like me. We're called to think like Jesus. And you mentioned the letters of Paul. You spent a lot of time with that. And I think a lot of us who grew up in churches of Christ, we spent a lot more time with Paul because we were looking for the blueprint. You know, here's how you do church. And as a result, when we look at worship, we look at what Paul would write to these. And we would skip what Jesus said about worship to the Samaritan woman in the Gospel of John. And what did we miss by doing that? We were reading letters, someone else's mail, and Paul was writing them letters because there were some issues going on and they weren't doing very well. But I like to start with Jesus. I like what you said about the Gospels. Let's start with the Gospels. What did Jesus say about this? And when I'm interacting with somebody, I think your words were, would Jesus say this? Mm-hmm. What a great litmus test right there.
Excuse me, it goes even further. I'm allergic to everything in Tennessee. It's trying to kill me, but so far we're hanging in. One of my little litmus tests, I guess, or challenges to myself. is to walk into a room and think, all right, what would Jesus do in this room? And it could be a room with great conflict, a church conflict, a family conflict. It could be a Walmart, and I'm just in there to grab something. But what would Jesus do along the way? That phrase, along the way, happens a lot in the Gospels. Along the way, he heals a leper. Along the way, he heals a woman with an issue of blood. Along the way, he restores sight to Bartimaeus. This wasn't his goal, but he had his eyes open as he went along the way. So what would Jesus do in this room? And the second is, when I leave the room, will I leave the room the way Jesus would have left it? You know, we don't slam doors and such, but we also try to leave a bit of peace. I was taught a phrase that really threw me back in the late 80s. We had just come to the States, and we were living in Lancaster, Ohio. And one of the elders at the little church that we settled at there, named Dean Tripp, and I didn't ask you, Dean, if I could use your name, but I'm going to do it. He had 3 boys, and they were all outstanding. And so we had just had a little girl, just 2 or 3 years old at that point. So I went to Dean and I said, I need help. You know, what do I do? And he gave really good advice. But this isn't on parenting. The advice that he gave I'd like to share today was one phrase. He said, remember the preciousness of others. And I said, what does that mean? Because I was raised in conflict. We were always in debate. It was always, what's the problem? It didn't matter whether it was politics, church, whatever. There was a fight. And so I said, everybody was the other. And so I'm going, what do you mean? And he started simple. He said, if you see a cart, a shopping trolley, put it back. You didn't leave it out there, but somebody could be struggling with walking or holding a toddler or the like, and or their car might get dinged up by it. Go ahead and put it back. I've never forgotten that. And he went on about just the preciousness of others, that person you're talking to, the person you're trying to not talk to. They are precious. When I travel, if I have to fly, I grit my teeth the whole time because you're stuck with people and you're out of control of your goods, your person, and the like. I see so many people losing it in airports, being rough, mean, fighting, biting comments. I keep thinking Jesus would probably visit some airports. And he wouldn't strike anybody dead. He would just be kind to people.
Yes.
So that's my job. That's peacemaking. And I think we often forget the peacemaking. Now, I don't want this to veer into a lesson on pacifism or not. But to me, there's room in Scripture for us not to be pacifist, but there's also room for us to be pacifist. It seems that God made different kinds of people. But our peacemakers, I've got to say this about the American military, there are always exceptions. But the American military leads the world in, once an enemy is captured, feed them, care for them, get them medical treatment, get them clean clothes. They lead the world in that and have for a long time. That, to me, is showing more peacemaking. After World War II, they rebuilt Europe. That's peacemaking. Well, you and I can't rebuild Europe. But I think we can do more than be peaceful. I think we can work on being peacemakers. But that requires engagement with other people. And I'm an introvert. How would you describe yourself?
Absolutely, introvert. I mean, if you and I were at the same hotel and we were eating breakfast, we'd probably look across the room at each other, nod or say hi, and sit at our tables and enjoy our breakfast in silence, maybe read a book without any interaction. I think we both would be okay with that.
Not only would we were. There was a time in Louisiana that I came out of my hotel. I was not visiting in his part of the state. And as I'm starting to eat my breakfast, I look over and see him just a couple tables away. We nodded and smiled and did not go to the other table. This is who we are.
Yes.
And people I think are shocked at how many ministers are introverts. I think a lot of them need to be to do the reading we do, the thinking we do, the producing of content that we do. Now, I want to give a little shout out here. Ben wrote a book years ago called Torn Asunder. We're going to see if we can get even a picture of that up on our website or something. I was raised also in the Churches of Christ. Our Safe Harbor is not a part of that. We're just independent. But people often wonder, how did the Restoration Movement or Stone Campbell movement break into 3 major denominations? Well, his little book shows you how we refuse to be a peaceful people and refuse to be in union or unity with each other because of really hurt feelings and how it's split. And it's a great book, and I hope people read it. Paul links patience with godliness. Now, you and I have already said that we are people of sin and faults and lack. I'll say for myself, and I think you would say for you, lack of talent and ability to do this job. It has to be God. It has to be the Holy Spirit. It has to be Him at work. The patience of God, according to Paul, is what saves us. God has been patient with me, and that's what's going to save me. And then Paul links peace and godliness. If we want peace in our life, we must be as patient with others as we want God to be with us. I don't know where to pull you into that. I'll just say I had one man once, one of our deacons, years and years ago. He was fed up because he had tried to get volunteers and it'd fall through. And he was now ready to throw away the whole thing. And he said, I'm ready just to quit. I give up. You can't help these people, And I looked at him and I said, why don't you try to be as patient with them as God is with you? And that turned him around. And I knew it would because it turned me around when I realized it.
Yeah.
What comes to your mind?
That's powerful, being patient with others. You think about that gripping scene in John chapter 13 where Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. And it doesn't say, and when he came to Judas, he skipped Judas because he knew what Judas was plotting or had already done. He knew where Judas's heart was, so he skipped him to reprove him and rebuke him. No, the text indicates he washed all their feet. When I'm tempted to look at somebody that I may have conflict with, and I may even go down the road, well, it's their problem, not mine, and it might be. But I always look and say, first of all, is there anything constructive out of this that God is trying to teach me that I need to learn? And secondly, I think one of the big lessons that comes about every single time is God saying, I want you to love them. I want you to love them. And to love someone is you want what's best for them. You care about their well-being. You pray God's blessings into their lives. And that's a tough thing to do. But if we want to have peace, I think that's the key to really having peace. Can I wash Judas's feet? Because the reality is, throughout my life, there have been times I've been Judas to Jesus, and He still washes my feet.
Very well said. I think of that story often because the Scripture shows that they didn't get it, and I think, well, I don't either. Very often, and one of the phrases that I also use when I work with people that they're disappointed. They've got a husband or a wife who are going to leave them or have left them. They've got a child who has made some really bad decisions. And they'll say, this is, now they're a this and a this and a this, and now they're hooking up with this person. I always say, always end your sentence with now. Because now is not forever. The last thing we should do to them is to bring the wrath of God into it. Because one of these days, a crisis will hit that person, and they're going to need to run. What direction do you want them to run? They're going to run toward the safe direction. You have to be the safe one. Now, it might be that your child has come out and wants to be with a same-sex partner, and people think this is the end of the world. And I always go, this is now. God is a God of grace. God is patient with them. We want to be godly. We are patient as well. Let God sort this out. Yeah. Well, all we can say is this is what's happening now. And that has really helped me, because there's a temporary thing in life. Life is temporary, but every decision we make is pretty temporary. I think it was Jerry Jones who would famously say, every marriage ends, either in divorce or death, but every marriage ends. It's temporary. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you have to treat it as something which is not an unlimited blessing, but something which has got to be a blessing now.
Right.
And the same with a sin or a problem. Mm-hmm. I was tempted by sins in my teens. I'm not tempted by now.
Right.
I'm tempted by sins now that I probably won't be in another few years. Mm-hmm. We change. But God has saved me all through this. Salvation, I tell people, is an event, but it's also a process. Mm. I was saved when I was baptized, but I'm still being saved.
Well said.
And they're still being saved, even if you think they're going down to perdition. Mm-hmm. It's right now they're going down that path.
Right.
But you need to be the safe place, the peaceful place they can run to when the crisis hits.
Yeah. So how do you, Patrick, as ministers, we deal with people quite often who are going through a traumatic episode in their life. Something has happened, and I like how you said end your sentence with now. But how do you as a minister for all these years and everything that you do now, how do you stay connected to the peace of Christ in your life?
It isn't easy. It isn't easy at all. I think if God had not given me permission through the stories in the Old Testament to storm the gates of heaven with laments and complaints, I wouldn't be able to make it. Yeah. I'll never be one of those people who just sings with a sweet smile on their face, just believe, and I just believe. I have to fight my way. I am Israel. I am one who wrestles with God. That's what the name means. Yeah. God called his children those who wrestle with me. And so I'm Jacob, but he only wrestled God once. I have season tickets. I keep thinking pretty much what Rachel Held Evans said. I am not sure about a lot of things, but I will not let go of Jesus. And I say to Jesus what Jacob said to whomever he was wrestling, I will not let you go until you bless me. I often tell my wife and others that I'm Mrs. Noah, because I imagine there was a point where she got fed up. The walls are sticky with pitch, the stink of the animals, the rocking of the ark, pounding of the rain, and she said, I had it. I'm out of here. Well, where are you going to go? And I have not found an escape that is worthy of the time. I work a lot in science. I cannot find a way we're here without a creator. Science can't either, by the way. And we have all kinds of ideas, but all of them have fatal flaws. The universe is bigger and weirder than we can imagine. And so all of our pet theories fail at some level. There has to be something outside of here. And that holds me in place while Jesus works on me. This is an orchard, and trees take forever to grow. And everything in the world wants to kill your tree. Weather, bugs, predators. One of the things I always like to ask people is, in this orchard of God's grace, the peace tree, what are the dangerous weeds that can choke out your tree? What are the insects that could attack the tree? What attacks your peace?
Wow, that's powerful. It's a sobering question. I think that it's a combination of outside and inside influences. Sometimes what attacks my peace is the voice, what I'm telling myself. When I'm telling myself things that God isn't saying to me. And so I have to stop and say, what does God say about this? You know, have you ever had a time where, as a minister, you felt like you spoke and you just blew it?
Oh, many.
That was horrific. And by the time you got back to your office, that sermon, you had ripped it up and vowed, I will never preach that again. That was horrible. And so sometimes then that can descend into, I'm not a good preacher. Why am I doing this? Nobody's really listening to me. And those are voices that will try to steal the peace that Christ offers to you. So you go back to what does Jesus say about you? You know, you're an image bearer of God. You're the beloved of God. You're His child. You're not those things that you're telling yourself. Now, sometimes we hear those things from outside sources that try to make a way into our heart. And so I think we put a filter on our heart. We don't want to become numb to people because we don't know what's going on. A lot of times when people hurt us, it's coming from a hurt that they already have in their life. So they are hurt people to begin with. So we want to be loving and compassionate, but at the same time, not take in everything negative that's said that can hurt us. And so I think learning to distinguish that and learning that God's calling me to be faithful to where He has put me, wherever that is, to be faithful and to trust that He will take care of that. You know, the storm in Mark chapter 4, for a lot of us, it's not a storm on a lake, it's trauma. It's conflict with people. It's disappointment, discouragement in our lives. And just as Jesus spoke to the storm, in Mark 4, He speaks to the storms in our lives. And He says, hush, enough's enough. And you see, that storm, that wasn't just a physical storm. You know why Jesus was going across the lake. There's a demon-possessed man.
Right.
And if you read the Gospel of Mark, He goes across the lake. He sets that man free. He heals him. And then He gets back in the boat and He goes back across. That was the only reason He went across the lake.
Right.
Something was trying to stop him from getting to that man. And I think a lot of us have been that man. We're never going to be free of whatever it is that is tormenting us, whatever regrets that we have, whatever pain that we have, whatever hurt and sorrow that we've internalized. And Jesus is coming across the lake to us. And there are forces that are trying to prevent Jesus from getting to us. And He says to those forces, hush. And then He comes to us. And He says to those forces that have oppressed us, hush, enough is enough. And he sets us free.
I love that. Our lives are full of invitations to combat or to discontent. On social media, you can put up a Bible verse and people will try to debate you. They'll come at you 5 different ways. It's an invitation to combat. You don't have to answer the invitation. Yeah. And then the world has invitations to discontent. You know, we have a new car to sell you. Right. You know, we'll give the kids a balloon if you come in. You
deserve this car.
That's right. You deserve this car. You should have these clothes. You shouldn't be wearing those clothes. You know, all of these invitations to discontent, we don't have to answer those invitations. We can be at peace.
Yeah.
I asked some kids once at a youth rally, there was going to be a break in the day, and there's a big mall next door. Remember malls? Those were fun. Yes. And they were all planning to go over there and have a great time for a couple hours, then come back. And I said, I want you to do something. School's about to start. Of course, they're all moaning at that. And I said, go find something you would like for school. Article of clothing, backpack, whatever it is. And then put it back and say, I really have enough. They loved that lesson. Some people, after 30 years, tell me they still remember that lesson. But the next few weeks, I got calls from parents saying they were upset with me because their kid wouldn't go out to buy new clothes with them. And I'm saying, oh, your child is content. Yes. They are at peace. It doesn't bother me that your iPhone is newer. It doesn't bother me that you have better parties. I am at peace where I am, who I am. It's very hard because the world does not want you to be at peace.
Yeah.
The idea is just don't take the invitation.
That's so hard, though. Social media. And was it Paul Faulkner who said years ago, you can't win a puking match with a buzzard?
Yes.
But we still try to. And we get both messy. And I appreciate the way you handle criticism on social media. You're very kind, but you're also very direct. And, go back, and I've posted about this already. You can read all the sermons. It's out there. But so many times in our culture, we don't want to do that research. We don't want to dig deeper. We just want that instant, and we want to spew on somebody, and that's not healthy at all.
Too many people believe that the way to raise themselves up is to step on someone else.
Yeah.
And yet if we are at peace and we are peacemakers, we actively work not to be engaged in that.
Yeah.
And that's something we're both working on, obviously. I appreciate so much who you are and the spirit you have shown, because I've seen you go through trials and you have remained level. And I know inside has got to be a roller coaster in a dark place. But you have kept your outside peaceful on behalf of God and for other people. And that has amazed me. In fact, I've even emailed you and said, if it were me, I wouldn't have even accepted that. I would have fought this. So I'm glad you chose peace, because you're somebody who I look to learn more about how to be. And I appreciate you coming and being a part of us today. And God bless you. God bless your family and your ministry. And don't be a stranger. Come back to our safe harbor as often as you can.
Thank you, Patrick.
Right.
That means a lot. And it's only possible through the Lord. I couldn't do any of that. It's the Lord.
We have that in common.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Patrick.